Hello everyone, my name is Akira. I'm a pianist, piano teacher, and a translator who's lived in 3 different countries. Today I'm going to talk about Hamon. On this channel, I'm posting my performance videos and videos related to and not related to music, so please subscribe and hit the bell button so you won't miss my future videos. One of the most frequently watched video on my channel is about Hanon, which is repetitive mechanical exercises that makes your fingers go faster and more independent on the piano. But many of my viewers commented that they thought it was about Hamon, so I decided to talk about that today. But the kind of Hamon I'm talking about today is not this one. Well, because I can't do it. I wish I could. That would be awesome. But today I'm going to talk about this Hamon, which means to expel someone from dojo, or in this case, piano studio. So basically, kicking out the students and refusing to teach anymore. As the thumbnail suggests, I was once kicked out by my teacher from her studio for not practicing. You may be thinking, you became a pianist and piano instructor and now you're a piano YouTuber. You can't have been not practicing enough to be kicked out of the studio. Well, regrettably, I wasn't. And I'm not talking about the level of not practicing in the college level when you talk among the music majors and especially piano performance majors. When you say to each other, oh, I didn't practice this week, that means you only practice 4 hours a day instead of 8. But I was once at the level where I would come home from the piano lesson and put down my piano bag next to the piano, and next time I touch that is when I go to the next lesson next week. So from there, how did I come back to the piano and then became a pianist and piano teacher? That's a part of the story I'm going to talk about today. Before I start, I want to say huge thank you to my patrons on patreon.com. They've been huge support as I try to make these videos more often. And for $3 or $10 per month, you can support me and this channel. I appreciate any help, and as a token of gratitude, my patrons get 3-day early access to all of my videos. If you're interested in becoming a patron and supporting this channel, I'll leave the link to the description. Alright, let's start! To understand why I got kicked out of my teacher's studio, first I'm gonna have to explain how I started piano. So I have 2 sisters, 2 older sisters. They were already taking piano lessons and they were practicing every day, like they're supposed to. And as a baby, I was just hanging around there and watching them play and then slowly figuring out how to do it myself as well. And they helped me a little bit too. So my first lesson actually came from my sisters. And then I got to the level where I could hear what they were playing and imitate it myself. So piano was sort of like a toy. And I naturally learned how to play like you would naturally learn how to speak. So my mother took me to the piano teacher and I was the age of 4. And she was reluctant first because of my age, but after she saw me playing some pieces my sisters were playing, she decided to teach me. And things went pretty smooth for a while because I accumulated so much skill before I actually went to the first lesson. So I was able to get by for a while by just doing a minimum practice. And of course my mom helped me as well. But then at one point, I exhausted all of my accumulated skills so far, and I really needed to practice like everybody else. This happens with a lot of students who have older siblings who are already taking lessons, or students who can quickly understand things. Because what we teach in the beginning is very basic and easy. And if you already know how to play a little bit, or if you can understand things quickly, then you can actually get by not practicing that much because you're not really doing anything difficult. Playing quarter notes, not so difficult. Keeping your fingers curved, if you know how to pay attention to it, it's not going to be very difficult. But then as you move up the level, there comes a time where you really have to start practicing every day to master each skill because as you advance, things get more and more difficult. Now you won't be able to get by doing a minimal practice anymore. But because for those students who are having easier time until then, it's a little bit harder transition to actually start practicing every day. So I often have to sit with those students and say, hey, things has been very easy for you until now, but this is how piano studies actually is because you want to learn new skill and it takes a lot of effort to learn new skill. So it was great you were able to speed through until now, but now you're gonna have to step back and really sit at the piano and then start learning each skill one by one. In my case, I really liked playing the piano and I really liked playing in the recitals, but I hated practicing, like everybody else does. There's no doubt that I had a great teacher, but as a teacher myself now, I feel like she didn't explain very well why we're doing those books, or at what point of piano study we are and where we're heading to. So without that, And with my personality, I really wasn't motivated to practice, but I loved my teacher, I loved music, I loved seeing my friends at the studio. So I didn't mind going to the lessons every week. But I wasn't practicing at all, so I wasn't making any progress. And my teacher knew that, but she didn't kick me out right away. That went on for months and months and months, maybe for a year. Looking back at that situation as a teacher myself now, that's a little tough situation. Because I wasn't having miserable time at the lesson. I was having fun, and I had great relationship with my teacher, and then great relationship with all the friends there. So usually, even for me, if there's a student who's not practicing and not making progress at all for a long time, I don't have any problem kicking them out. Because if you're not practicing, if you're not having fun, it's a waste of money, waste of your time, and waste of my time. But because I was having such a fun time, except the fact that I wasn't practicing and not making as much progress, stopping the lesson altogether might not have been the best for me. But then there comes a time where my teacher really had it, and then decided to kick me out, which I totally deserved, because most of the weeks I was having zero practice at all. So my teacher sat with me and said, "Hey, I know you haven't been practicing, and you have other interest. So why don't you pursue that interest? But you're always welcome to come back if you want." So that was that. I didn't have to go to piano lessons anymore. I remember being relieved at the time. I was officially kicked out of the studio, and I didn't have to practice anymore. Not that I was practicing a lot. I heard about this later, but that night, my mother and my teacher spoke with each other. And my teacher told my mother that he's gonna come back. And I did. So a few months passed since I quit piano. And then there was this annual choir competition at school. In many of the Japanese schools, there are annual choir competition. All the students in each homeroom get together and learn choral song and compete with other homerooms. So all the students have to learn their parts. But if you are a pianist, you can actually accompany them. In Japan, there are usually a few students who can play the piano in each class. But in my case, everybody knew I played the piano, and there's a huge gap between my character. I was sort of like a class clown. And if you didn't know, nobody would have guessed I played the piano. So maybe everybody liked the gap. So I was always voted to become an accompanist, which I enjoyed. But that year's music was particularly difficult. And I was able to learn it by myself, but my teacher offered to help. So I went back to my teacher's studio and I saw my friends playing a lot more advanced stuff. And that was a life-changing moment. So thinking back, piano was always in my life since I was born because my sisters were playing and I naturally learned how to play a little bit. And as long as I could remember, piano has been always there. I always had to practice, it was part of my life. And I didn't realize how great it was and how I loved piano and music. So being away from that for a while totally opened up my eyes. And I finally realized my passion. After that, I started taking lessons again, and this time I practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced because I had years of not practicing. So I had to catch up with all of my friends. So after that, did I practice all the way up to college and became who I am now? Actually, no. There's another time when I didn't practice for a few years, but that's a story for another video. So after this experience, do I ever kick out my students from my studio? Actually, yes. But it takes a lot of not practicing to be kicked out of my studio. Because I was the way I was, not practicing at all for months and years, and my teacher graciously kept teaching me. And thanks to that, now I became a pianist. So in order for somebody to be kicked out of my studio, you've gotta be really not practicing. And thankfully, it doesn't happen very often in my studio. In fact, I haven't kicked out my students for years. Part of that is because we have this trial lesson before you sign up for regular lessons. And I explain what it takes to take piano lessons. And I won't hide the fact it's really hard. You gotta practice every day to get anything out of the lessons. So everybody knows what you're getting into. And maybe part of that is because I keep reminding my students what you're doing right now is just a step. If it's a video game, it's a tutorial so that you can get into something really fun and you have a full control of the instrument, and that's a time when it gets really fun. But when I was working for this big school, I had to do that quite often. At the school where I was working before, when you register, all you have to do is talk to the registrar and then grab your spot and pay for the tuition. And actually, a lot of students got financial aid, so they weren't even paying a lot of tuition. So students didn't get full disclosure of what it takes to take piano lessons and get something out of it. And at the same time, reduced tuition motivated parents to use piano lesson as a daycare. So there are many situations where I had to talk to the parents later on and tell them how this piano lesson really goes, including that you're gonna have to get an acoustic piano. I still remember this one particular student who will be dropped off at the school every week and comes to my lesson. And she never knows where to put her hands. And I swear every week I make sure she knows how to play her piece so that she can go home and practice, including where to put the hands on, how to read the first note, first finger number, set your hand accordingly, and she demonstrates that in front of me. But next week, somehow, she's forgotten everything, and she looked really, really miserable each week. So that's the time I had to call that student's parents and say, hey, so-and-so is really not having good time and she's not practicing, so you're not getting anything out of these lessons. And I would rather spend more time with students who are dedicated. And she should spend more time on something she's really interested in, rather than coming to the piano lessons every week that she's not getting anything out of. And at the time, I thought it was really the best for her. But don't get me wrong, even at that big school, I had lots of wonderful students who are very dedicated. And because of that, I overstayed there. And that's a story for another video as well. After being hammered by my teacher, and as a teacher having kicked out a few of my students before, sometimes I think it's inevitable to do so. There's no point for students to stick to piano lessons if they're not getting anything at all and not having good time. So it's best for everybody involved to move on. But a lot of that can be prevented if you spend a little bit of time to communicate with each other and make sure we know each other's expectation before you start taking lessons. Although we can't control everything, as a piano teacher, we have an obligation to at least try to keep the students motivated and create an environment that they want to come back each week and learn. And my policy is to keep teaching the student as long as they're enjoying it and getting something out of the lesson each week. Because who knows? I got hammered before and look what I became. So I'm not in a position to give up on the student just because they're not practicing as much as they should. Alright, that was my experience of being kicked out of my teacher's studio and my thoughts about expelling students from the studio. If you thought it was interesting, please hit the like button so YouTube will know this is a good content and it'll recommend it to other people too. Have you ever been kicked out of the studio? Did you deserve it or was it unfair? Please leave that in the comment. If you want to hear about the second time I didn't play the piano for a few years and how I got here today, please leave that in a comment too. If you haven't done so, please subscribe and hit the bell button so you won't miss my future videos. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.